Good morning, everybody. So I'm Meg Wise, Executive Director, Smith Memorial Playground in Fairmount Park. Who has been to Smith before? All right. That's a little smaller than I would have thought. Because Smith has been there for 119 years. And I'm going to get into kind of the history of Smith, what Smith does today, why play is important, and then sort of some trends that I see happening in play that are really exciting. I have to just give a preface. I'm not really an expert in play, except that I was a child, so I played a lot, as I know you guys did. And just to give some parameters, when I'm talking about play today, I'm talking about kids' unstructured play, and I'm defining play as something that you do, that kids do without a purpose, completely voluntary, no one makes them do it, and it's fun to do. So that's kind of how I see play. And I hope that, not just children, but adults are spending a lot of time playing too. I just want to start just to kind of get you guys thinking back to when you were kids. What did you do to play when you were little? Like, what were your favorite ways to play? Like, I built a tree house in the backyard of my house. It didn't really have like a platform. It was a very rudimentary tree house, but I had a pulley system, and that to me was the greatest thing in the world because I could pull up my books and my snacks, and I just loved to be in that space. Yeah?
I was an only child, I'm going to preface this.
Me too.
I had a yellow umbrella, and my yellow umbrella would either transform me into Mary Poppins, so I would hop off the picnic table with my yellow umbrella, or I would set it up in my living room and play beach, which just sit there.
Very cool. Yeah?
I love lake swimming and in particular a rope swim as a way of getting
Yeah.
So running around outside or playing with my politically incorrect Barbies, which I did not know were politically incorrect at the time.
So you were just a child. It's okay.
No, they were fun.
I did too. Yeah. Lancey.
Next generation, I got extremely into American Girl dolls. Those were kind of the Barbies of the 90s, except really expensive and about history.
Yeah.
I was just telling my boyfriend about this. I had Felicity, and for a very long time, would like ask for tea so that I could turn my teacup over, like as if I was a revolutionary hero. Because that was the only thing I now remember about Felicity.
That's great, but like,
Turn her teacup over.
and look at you now. Like, that has totally informed you and how you are as an adult.
Still hate tea.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. And so Smith, it's in East Fairmount Park. And as I said, it's been there for 119 years. It was founded in 1899. And this fellow, that's Richard Smith, who gave the money to have it built. And this representation of him is on the Smith Memorial Arch, which you guys may know. It's on the other side of the park near the Please Touch Museum. It's that amazing public sculpture that has whispering walls. The Smith family, their adult child passed away, so they ended up having a lot of money. So in the 1890s, when they were starting dreaming of a place where kids could go to play, that was like the most progressive, forward-thinking idea ever. Because no one was thinking about that. No one was thinking about why kids needed to play. They were thinking about, when can we get kids into the workforce? And where are the children to work in my factory? So it was really, really revolutionary. So they left money to construct the Smith Playhouse on East Fairmount Park and to build the memorial to the Civil War in West Fairmount Park. Richard Smith did not serve in the Civil War. He was a typesetter. And there were a lot of design people here. So he brought in designers from Germany and invented print technologies. And there are still some fonts that came out of the Smith business, 100 years ago, that I think some are still in use today. So here he is in all his glory on that sculpture. And this is what Smith looked like at the turn of the century. So it is in Fairmount Park. It's public land, but Smith has always been operated independently. So we're free. It's always been free. And Smith has always drawn a really wide and diverse audience, which is today like a real point of pride to us. Children have always come with adults on visits to Smith. So it's kind of intergenerational and intended as a family destination or a group destination for a school or a daycare. The idea of being outside was really important to the Smiths in the 1890s. Philadelphia was a very different kind of urban experience 100 years ago. You could get yellow fever walking down the street. There were health risks. So to take children out into a green space to play was, very important to them. There's a playhouse there. It's 16,000 square feet. It's a very huge and elegant and kind of dramatic building, and it is filled with toys. Like every time I tell people that, yeah, filled with toys, and kids come and they do whatever they want. The fact that play can be unstructured, that kids don't need to be told what to do all the time, but can decide what they want to do and what they think would be fun, has always been a really important part of the Smith experience. There's a giant wooden slide, which even if you haven't been to Smith, you may have heard of. It is extraordinary. This is what it looked like when it was brand new. It looks almost exactly the same today. A little different. The access to it is different. So it's just a big, wide, waxed wood slide, really fast. You sit on a coffee sack or burlap sack to go down it. And if you're like 8, you can do it 100 times. And it's just as fun on the 100th time. So this is what Smith looks like today. Really extraordinary building. It is kind of a traditional playground. I think it's the best playground currently in Philadelphia. We'll talk about design, because obviously we're at the Center for Architecture and Design. And that's really important for children's play. This is not unique, right? It has rubber play surface. It has plasticky or wood alternative play structures, but it's pretty cool. And this particular section was built in 2010, so really cool for that time. It is, open for kids. It's for kids to come and play, to interact with each other. We have about 200,000 visitors every year. The target audience is kids 12 and younger. And families come from every single zip code area of the city. So it's very, very diverse. In terms of cultural background, race, ethnicity, income, family income, everyone is mixed together, and kids don't recognize the barriers that adults might. That to me is like the most beautiful and wonderful thing about Smith. This is what the inside looks like now. We've done some pretty extensive renovations on the first interior floor. There's some lots on our to-do list. So wait, just to go back, this looks pretty awesome, right? Okay. I want to talk sort of about why that's so important, because this is kind of a typical city play space for kids in Philadelphia. It's a public school in North Philadelphia. It's a tarmac, Half of the schools in Philadelphia presently don't really offer recess. Or if they let kids outside, it's very structured, and they don't have free range or autonomy to do what they want to do. Really structured, adults telling kids when to do it, what to do, when to stop. So when we talk about creating a place for children to play and to have their own free expression, this is kind of the enemy, right? We don't want kids in places like this. We want to provide alternatives to families so they don't have to spend too much time in a place like this. And I recognize some of you may be involved with it. There are lots of things underway in Philadelphia to improve play spaces, and lots of schools actually have had their play spaces improved through pretty innovative design, which is really good and really exciting that that's happening. So this is why play? What is play? Why is it important? I want to start at the top because play is a really surprisingly simple way to help kids grow and thrive in terms of their physical health, their social capacity, their emotional health, their language development, and their cognitive skills. So starting with physical, that's pretty obvious, right? Obesity, diabetes, those are pretty epidemic crises for kids in the United States, and play is a really great way to combat those. So you're running around, you're getting exercise, large muscles, small muscles. That makes sense, right? Social, this is where, when I was talking about unstructured play and kids getting to decide what they want to do, just think like when you were little and were solving problems or planning a game, inventing a game, playing it with other kids. You had to develop a lot of skills to interact with those kids and to not kill each other and to figure out who would win the game or what the parameters of the game were. So giving kids a space to engage in those interactions without adults refereeing or interceding is really, really important. Emotional skills, I was talking to someone earlier about trauma. Play is a really critical way for children to build kind of emotional strength and self-resilience because trauma that they've had from, there's a whole scale of traumas, right? But when you're playing, you can reenact, you do imaginative play, you kind of do scenarios where you're going through something or pretending to be someone else. And play is a really great way for kids to kind of relive and take mastery and ownership of things that might have happened to them that were traumatic. So it's a really important way for children to master their emotional control. Language, some really great research coming out of Temple University. Kathy Hirsch-Pasek is a professor there. We are really inspired by her work. I've attended a talk by her in this room. Increasingly, there are lots of studies that show the really important connection between children's time and opportunity to play and the way that they develop language skills. And it's about representation, right? Because language is representation, symbols standing for things or ideas. And that's really at the basis of a lot of play, when you pretend that, this is, hey, I'm going to call you on the phone. This is my phone. I'm able to take an object or a word and let it stand in for something else that it isn't. So kids' ability and time, opportunity to explore those on their own is a really critical way that they begin to develop language skills. This is where it can be, the importance of play can sometimes be counterintuitive to even the most well-intentioned adults, right? You might think, I don't know, you all look very young. You probably don't have children. I do. But if you think, I want my child to succeed, graduate from high school, go to Harvard, what should they be doing? I'll give them some language worksheets. I'll give them some activities to do, related to language so they can ace the SAT and get into a great college. That's actually not the best route or the most proven route. You should probably let them have free time, free range, ability to connect with other kids, to make things up, to use their imagination, to be creative. That's where, the things that happen when they're little like that are what's going to help them, succeed in terms of language in a world that's very dominated by language and communication. And then cognitive skills, very similar to that. There are, when kids are playing and they're kind of assessing risks, they're having to engage in new spaces or places, there are actually neural connectors that are sparked through that, and it helps the brain grow when children are playing. So it's kind of easy to denigrate play, like, oh, it's just play, right? Like, it's almost play has become something that's like not serious or not important, but it's really like one of the most important things. There's a play researcher, Stuart Brown, who has done a pretty extensive studies, and like every mammal plays. Like, it's not just a human thing, like animals play. He also did a pretty extensive study of people who were on death row for murders or like mass murders. Almost to a one, people who have gotten to such a crisis in terms of like social engagement and civility didn't have opportunities to play. So I'm not saying if you don't play or you didn't play, you're going to end up on death row, but like it's a really critical part of the human experience, and ones that are really quite simple and inexpensive ways for us to modify our behavior a bit in the way that we take care of children or mind children or like put children through school experiences to create opportunities where they can have their own child-directed, unstructured play. And the benefits for them as individuals and the benefits for society as a whole are tremendous. Okay. Have you guys seen a sign like this? It's crazy. And I actually have it up here in kind of a sarcastic way, because I want to get now into kind of things that are happening in play that I think are really exciting, and hope that we have some time at the end to talk about them. So the first one is, and I'll just give you so you know what to expect. I'm going to talk about risk, want to talk about free-range parenting, nature play, and then trends in Philly and kind of what funders are doing in Philly. That is very exciting. So this is a really common sign that you'll see on playgrounds around the city. Play at your own risk, like as if you shouldn't play, it's dangerous. But it's actually, risk is really, really important, as we're finding. And unfortunately, a lot of playgrounds, I didn't include a slide of a really bad playground, but you've seen them. You've seen them everywhere. They're called KFC, carpet, kit, a fence, and a carpet, KFC playground. So they're usually a primary color. They usually have a monkey bar. They usually have a slide thing. Like, you've literally, it's every playground you've seen, right? And they're totally homogeneous. Each one looks exactly the same. And they're really pretty boring. So they're not the exact opposite of this. I'm gonna have some slides up there. And I tried to link these to articles that had come out in the past few weeks, just so you could reference them if you wanted, but you probably can't tell that that's from the New York Times from March 20-something or 18-something. So something that is not yet happening much in the US, but for a long time has been very popular, particularly in Europe, are adventure playgrounds. Has anyone heard of them? One person. Two, yes. Okay, so adventure playgrounds got popular in Europe at the end of World War II because everything was destroyed. Like public spaces had been bombed out. So raw materials like tires or pieces of wood, building tools like saws and nails and stuff were made available to kids to create their own spaces. It's called adventure playground or sometimes a junkyard playground. They've remained popular in Europe, and in fact in London, many of them are organized, much as we have rec centers. They'll have adventure playgrounds where there's really a space like in transition and in motion with raw materials for kids to construct their own playscapes. And in this one, and you can't see very well with this slide, but there's a kid who's kind of made a ramp and is jumping off this ramp. And you can see it looks kind of nuts. Like there's a lot of just wood and trash and stuff. But they're really pretty amazing because kids don't get hurt on these playgrounds, like hardly ever, like at a tiny fraction of the rate that children get hurt on playgrounds in the United States. And a woman who lives in Philadelphia, Megan Talarowski, did a really cool study where she collected the rates of injury and how kids engaged with materials in adventure playgrounds in London and the rates of injury in the United States, where people who have playgrounds are very focused on safety. They're not laws per se, but there are these standards of safety which anyone who creates or maintains a playground needs to adhere to. And it's, so you don't fall and hit your head or break your arm. But in fact, there are many, many more incidents of injury on those safe playgrounds, and hardly any on playgrounds that look like this. Because when kids have an opportunity to assess risk and to take risks, they learn how to manage a situation. So not only do they not get hurt on that playground at that time, but as they grow up and encounter other things that are risky, like, should I get in this car with my friend who just drank a lot? Or, should I cross the street in front of these speeding cars? They've had opportunities to see what happens when you do something, kind of cause and effect. And those are skills that you build, and you learn how to keep yourself safe if you have opportunities to explore what might be dangerous or risky to you. We're not going to see one of these in Philadelphia for a very long time, but it's really amazing that they are out there. There's actually an adventure playground in Berkeley that's been running since I think about 1960. So they do exist. This is the Berkeley one, actually. And they're constantly in transformation because, I don't know if this is a pointer, but on the right where there's kind of a little fort with two circles, that might the next week be totally different because kids will have taken that part off and reattached some other pieces. And that's the kind of the opportunity for things to change and evolve is also really important. Because I don't know, maybe someone in here actually did break their arm or something because they were on top of the monkey bars. Yeah. Broken leg, because it was probably really boring, and so you weren't doing the monkey bars, you were probably doing something that was not really what the equipment was intended for, because it didn't give you an opportunity to like be creative. So you kind of misappropriated that and got hurt. If only you'd had a saw, you would have been fine. This is a picture at Smith in 2013. The US Green Building Council was doing a big national conference in Philadelphia. And wherever they do that across the country, they pick a city to give a project back. And we were selected to kind of be the recipient of that, because the project we proposed was we wanted to create a space that kids built themselves. They designed it, they built it, and then they could play on it themselves. So when we first were just thinking through this, we were thinking vertical adventure playground. Then we talked to our insurance agent. No, it can't happen yet in Philadelphia or in the States, but so this structure, it looks like a blue kind of trapezoid. It's an adventure playground, but it's very horizontal at Smith. But it is a space that kids designed, built, and currently play on, and it's there. And this girl has a big drill in her hand. So she made it. And we're really, excited and proud that we're able to bring this little bit of adventure play to Philadelphia. So the next kind of big issue in play is autonomy of children's movement in public spaces. This is a graphic from Sheffield, England. And the really large, the largest kind of white shaded space is going back in a family where there's currently a kid who I think is 8. His great-grandfather, when he was growing up many, many years ago and was 8 years old, he could walk 6 miles to go to a fishing hole. So the black dot on the left is where he lived, and he was able to go all the way down here to the lower right on his own at 8 years old, taking my fishing pole, gonna go out. Now, admittedly, that was a long time ago. It was probably at the turn of the 20th century. The smaller, toward the left-hand side, there's a smaller circle. That's the grandfather. So probably that person was maybe born in the 40s, 30s. He was able to go 1 mile. He could go explore the woods around his house. He had a range of motion of 1 mile. The mom in this family, when she was 8 years old, in the tippy top left, she could walk half a mile to go to the public swimming pool. So on her own, trusted, free to go that space. And then someone who's growing up now, the tiny, tiny dot on the far left, 8 years old, he's allowed to go to the end of his street, 300 yards away. Did you guys, when you were younger, when you were kids, like how far could you go? Pretty far?
Our neighborhood.
Your neighborhood?
Which was a big neighborhood.
Yeah. Did anyone like have a bike and just like go off in the city on their bike? Yeah. That it may be reflective, like that you guys are, many of you, I think, design professionals, and you had that freedom to explore. So a lot of things have changed in our society. Has made parents anxious about letting their kids go out on their own, and I don't want to, denigrate fears, like legitimate fears that parents may have. But the fact is, the spaces that children grow up in are radically, radically different. And the world of experience for kids is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it may well be that there are other things that have happened. Like the great-great-grandfather probably had 0 hours or minutes of screen time because there were no screens, right? So what was there to do but to go fishing? There are kind of alternative attractions to children. The kid who only goes to the end of his block probably spends 7 hours with a screen. That's an average. It's a typical amount of time for a child to be spending on a screen today. But at the same time, I think a lot of it is fear that parents have, perhaps unfounded fear that something will happen to their child when they're out in the world. It's just another article that appeared recently. It's actually a thing that was on NPR, I think a couple of weeks ago. So free-range parenting, has anyone ever heard of that? It first hit the news maybe a few years ago when a set of parents, a mom and dad in New York, let their child ride the subway to go to a friend's house. And Child Protective Services came, and they were nearly arrested because that was not acceptable to let a 10-year-old kid ride the subway across town in New York. And it sparked a really big kind of crisis of what is responsible parenting and what is irresponsible parenting. So Utah has just passed a law that if you let your child go out on their own, that's okay. Like, you're allowed to do that. That's not considered a crime, which is really extraordinary. Like, it's not a crime to let your child be in the city on their own. I recognize, though, this is like really complicated. It's kind of, a affluent white family in Manhattan letting their child take the subway across town to visit a friend is very different from just thinking of Tamir Rice in Cleveland, the 12-year-old boy who was shot by police in a park. He was out on his own, on his bike, because he had permission to do that, right? And he was killed. So it's a very complicated situation. But the fact that, it may be possible, we may be in an intellectual space or cognitive space where kids can't be out in the city is kind of scary, right? And actually, there's a guy who does research in England named Tim Gill, who talks about the design of cities and like what a well-designed city is. And some people posit that if a city needs a playground, it's a very badly designed city. Like, it has failed if it needs a playground, because all spaces within a city should be playful and should encourage people to participate and should offer opportunities for just engagement. So throw that out there to design people, right? It's an interesting question. The next kind of big topic is nature play. Last Child in the Woods, book by Peter Louvre, came out about 10 years ago. It's been a long time already. But it's kind of extraordinary when he put this book out. He was documenting the fact that kids today, particularly in America, have almost no access to green spaces. And that as the decline of time spent in natural spaces, which just means like touching a tree bark or sitting on grass or getting muddy, like those connections to nature and the way that kids play in nature is really essential to the way that their mind works. And that as that time that kids spend outside in nature has decreased, yeah?
Could you please repeat the name of the book?
Oh yeah, Last Child in the Woods. Yeah, by Peter Louvre, L-O-U-V. So as that time in play outside has decreased, other things have spiked, like attention deficit disorder. Like when kids spent time outside playing and had tactile experiences with nature, like attention deficit disorder didn't really occur. It was really rare. So it's not an accident, is what he puts forth in that book, and puts a lot of really good arguments to explain why many like individual challenges and sort of societal challenges could be remedied if people, particularly children, spent more time connecting to nature. So in Northern Europe, like Germany and Scandinavia, they have lots of what are called forest kindergartens. And they're kindergartens that don't have classrooms. The kids are outside, they're in the woods. That's where they play and learn and go to school.
But like all year round, right?
All year round, yeah. There's no bad weather, you just need a bigger coat, heavier coat, you need, earmuffs. So really cool what is happening in education, especially in Northern Europe, around nature. In the middle part of the United States, there are a lot of nature preschools that started, I think, kind of in the 70s. There's one in Philadelphia at the Schuylkill Nature Center up in Roxborough, which is really neat. And we're hoping to start one at Smith as well in the next couple of years. So really leveraging our location in the park, recognizing the Smith's initial value and their belief in the importance of getting kids out into park settings. This is what it looks like at Smith right now. We do have a nature play area, and the favorite part of it is a kind of a mud pit and digging in dirt, which kind of sounds ridiculous, right? This is my job. I'm standing up in front of you saying, yeah, really, if you are connected to kids, you have kids in your life, just let them dig in dirt and get muddy. And that is one of the most impactful actions you can take. This is at Smith too. So the safety standard thing that I mentioned before, it's not laws per se, but there are these really strict regulations. So we're letting kids climb on these logs, as kind of a balancing beam. Some people would be very concerned about that. We think it's actually really, really important and kind of the next step forward. for kids' health and well-being. Okay, last part, and I don't even know when we started talking, but I should finish before 10, right? Yeah. Okay, great. So some things that are... Great job. Good, thank you. Things that are happening in Philadelphia that are exciting. This was something that I just saw on Billy Penn the other day, and it refers an article about the urban thinkscape, which again, Kathy Hirsch-Pasek, the Temple professor that I mentioned, she was kind of the driver of that. It's a play space at 43rd and Lancaster. And the idea is, it kind of goes back to when I said, Tim Gill said, if a city needs a playground, it's a poorly designed city. So this initiative, it's funded by the William Penn Foundation, who has been a hero in beginning to support play and not yet taking credit about it. So I'm gonna say these words, which they probably don't want said, but Philadelphia Playful Learning City. Have you guys heard that? It's a huge funding initiative that the William Penn Foundation is rolling out very slowly. And the Urban Thinkscape is something that they funded, which falls under that umbrella. As I said, it's at 43rd and Lancaster. And the idea is, how do you take things that occur naturally in an urban landscape, like a bus stop or a parking meter? You know, there are things that exist in our environment, and how do we make them more playful without having, you know, like a designated play space? So integrating play opportunities into the urban landscape. And what they've done at 43rd and Lancaster, if you haven't seen it, or you may have driven past it and said, what the heck is that? You should go check it out. It's a little bit kind of an exaggeration of what they're trying to do, because it's a lot of pieces that are in pretty close proximity on what was basically just an unused kind of blank triangle lot on a corner. If this really builds up steam and other cities pick it up, you might see these play elements kind of going down multiple blocks. But it gives you an idea of what is something that, you know, provides a play opportunity within an urban setting where a kid's just walking by. Oh, I'm walking by this bus stop. Oh, I can play this game with these things that move on it. So that is really exciting. The William Penn Foundation is also funding a project that we're involved in called Informal Learning Initiative. And it's working with cultural institutions and neighborhood organizations to provide more opportunities for kids and adults to learn in ways like totally outside the classroom. So for us, it's getting families who live in North Philadelphia and participate in a program to serve at-risk and underserved children, getting them to come to Smith and to use play as an opportunity for learning. This has been more publicly announced by the William Penn Foundation. There are kind of like 8 different partners around the city that will be doing this project for the next couple of years. We also, has anyone been in a free library lately where there's a climbing wall? So we've been involved in that, yeah. The Cecil B. Moore Library, the King Sessing, and there's another one. There are 3 libraries that have committed to providing play spaces within a library. Smith's role in that is educating the librarians, some of whom are a little alarmed or a little, you know, they need to kind of wrap their heads around, okay, we just built a climbing wall in the King Sessing Library. Like, what does this mean for children and reading and quiet? It doesn't sound like it's going to be a quiet activity. So our role is helping librarians, you know, embrace this and recognize the value of creating play spaces in kind of atypical play spaces. I also want to give props to the Community Design Collaborative, which I think is located in this building and does lots of gatherings in this room. In 2015, they had a big initiative called Play Space. Was anyone involved with that or attended any sessions? They partnered with daycare centers around the city, and they really piloted great design. So the opposite of that primary color, totally homogeneous play structure. They were really supporting an initiative to get people, both designers and also just citizens and parents and people who care about children, thinking about what is good design and how can we make that more accessible to kids and families throughout the city. Centennial Playground. Has anyone driven past in West Fairmount Park near the Please Touch Museum? Really cool that they're building this brand new playground, which is going to be open, I think, probably by the end of the summer. And Brian Haynes is the architect for that play space. He's the guy who's doing the rail park. He did Sister Cities, which is a really exciting, relatively new playground. And we're working with him to create a new nature-based play area at Smith in our front lawn. So if you've been to Smith, there's a very large front lawn, which is dominated by cars and parking. So really trying to make that playable again and programmable. So there's a lot going on in Philadelphia. And this is a slide from our Everyday Literacy Informal Learning Initiative program. So I want to encourage you guys, come to Smith if you haven't been. You do need to have a child with you, but we can, if that's a problem, if that's an obstacle, let me know. We can work it out. I'd be happy to show you around. And may we all have as much fun as this kid in the yellow shirt, right? Because that is what play is about. That is what I hope we can all spark in our lives, even though we're grown up now. And that's it. I'd love to hear from you. And right now, I think we have time for questions.